I'm Carole Switzer. I'm the co-founder of OCEG. I'm a first-generation American. My father was a German Jew who left Germany when he was 14 in 1936, was sent to a boarding school for German Jewish kids in England in order to get out of Nazi Germany. My mother was a Scottish Jewish woman from Edinburgh. Very small Jewish community, but a very close-knit one. And years later, when my father was in the U.S. Army during World War II, he was, for a period, stationed in Edinburgh. And he went to the synagogue for services, and my grandfather took him home for dinner, and the rest is history. And my parents, when I was growing up, were very socially conscious and very liberal, very involved in the civil rights movement in the 60s. I remember going to, community meetings and things with them. And I think I've just sort of, that's the basis of my belief structure. I graduated from law school in 1982 from George Washington University, where we focused a lot on regulatory issues. And what was interesting is it was the Reagan era, and a lot of environmental regulations were not being enforced. I took one semester of environmental law, and the professor canceled the second semester because he said, I'm not teaching it because nobody's enforcing it. He was kind of in a protest mode. I went to work with a law firm where I had been a law clerk that had a lot of California agricultural clients. And at that time, the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act was being really updated. So when I first started out, all the young women lawyers wore suits that were made out of men's suiting and little kind of bow ties, and horrible period of time for fashion in the legal world. And that's just not the case anymore. My job was to go to those hearings and then prepare sort of the updated version of what would be coming out based on what I heard, building a legislative history, and then following through on it. And as a result of that, even though I was a pretty junior associate, I was the most knowledgeable person in my law firm about this law that then became pretty important. I began to realize that a lot of these organizations, even big ones that were very challenged by environmental regulation, didn't really have a structured approach to compliance with those regulations. So for many years of my legal practice, I worked directly in compliance, helping organizations structure and define what a compliance program needed to include and how it should be structured and managed. I left legal practice and I started a business. And at the point at which I had sold that business to my partner is about the time that I met Scott. And Scott at that time was a strategic advisor and an investor in a number of startup companies that themselves started to have a need for a compliance structure. And he said to some of them, well, what's the framework for compliance? We'll follow that framework. We'll set up a program. And they said, there is no compliance framework. And he was kind of blown away by that. So he decided at that point, great, I'll start an organization. We'll make it a nonprofit. We'll get a lot of knowledgeable people to participate because it's a nonprofit. And it'll be a 6-month project, and we'll create a framework for compliance. And then we began to develop what ultimately became the GRC capability model. As we built out that compliance framework, we realized about the time we put the first version out for public review that it really needed to go beyond the organizational structure of compliance, and it needed to tie those compliance efforts to business objectives, to governance, to risk management. And so we developed the concept and the terminology around GRC. And the one thing I discovered pretty early was that a lot of lawyers, although they understand the law and the regulation, they don't really understand how it applies in the business on a day-to-day basis, or how the recommendations that they make affect the ability to achieve the business objectives, which is why they started to become, compliance people started to become known as the Department of No, N-O, when they should be the Department of No, K-N-O-W. Shortly after we started OCEG, maybe 3 or 4 years after, I was invited to do some presentations at a firm in Bogota. They invited in a newspaper journalist, or maybe it was a business type magazine journalist, and he asks me the cause of the financial collapse in the 80s. In general, it was about the failure of risk management, right? And that a lot, instead of one big challenging risk being taken by banks, lots of small incremental risk decisions were being made that were, tilting the overall risk profile too heavily, that was closing the little margin of room that you have. And a lot of the accumulation of these little risks is what tipped things. And I think this whole issue of mobility at the decision maker level especially, has a big impact on the way that people think about it. The average life of a CEO in their job is 3 years. So if that's true, or even if it's 5 years, those CEOs are making risk decisions that are based on their short tenure. So they're willing to take risks that they see as potentially being realized in a bad way after their tenure, if it will drive up profitability during their tenure. I am shocked that I continue to see people, including analysts in the tech field, who still think of GRC as just a compliance issue, who really do not understand that GRC is a business management philosophy that is completely tied to helping to drive the achievement of objectives while acting with integrity and addressing uncertainty. I also think there are way too many people that think of GRC as a technology only. It is not. It is a structured framework of capability, team, process, policy, technology. It's not just technology. Many years ago, I think this began, honestly, because when people first started to develop what they called GRC platforms, they did it by just pulling together whatever their company's offerings already had that met certain pieces of the need. SAP, for example, they pulled things they already had, one of which was access control. And I went to conferences where every person in the room where I was speaking, if you asked them, understood GRC to be access control. And just created a tremendous backlog of learning that needed to be done to understand it more broadly. I think that's still the biggest problem. I also think women in this field, and more generally in law, have learned over the years, you don't have to, behave like your male colleagues to be powerful and to be convincing. There definitely are times where the principles and values that I hold seem to be under attack. I think everybody probably feels that way, no matter what their particular sentiments or values are, right? The world is cyclical. And generally, to be honest, I would say most things come around and are fixable at later dates.